Have you ever felt the discomfort from anxiety and have just tried to tell yourself to stop being anxious? Yeah, it doesn't go very well, does it? And when it doesn't work out, our inner bully starts to kick in, and then we're dealing with anxiety and this inner criticism, and it can just really take a toll on our confidence. Today, we're going to walk through why we can't just talk ourselves out of the anxiety that we experience, and I'm going to run through one cognitive behavioral therapy technique that uses our thoughts to help tell our amygdala that we're actually okay and we're not in immediate danger. Let's dive in. We're going to explore a little bit of brain science for a second. Our brain has a ton of neural connections. That's how different parts of our brain interact and send messages back and forth. Today, I'm going to be talking about two different parts of the brain that we have learned about in other videos, but I'm going to do a brief run through today. So we're going to be talking about the cortex and the amygdala. Now, if you haven't already watched those two other videos, I am going to leave the links here for you so you can check those out. But if you don't have time to check those out today, no worries. I'm going to go through a brief run through of what you need to know for this video. So the cortex is in charge of logical thought as well as decision making and some other stuff. And the amygdala is where our anxiety lives. So that's where our threat detection specialist is. Now I'm going to use my superb artistic ability to draw this out for you. So I'm just going to draw a line here, and this will be the cortex and this will be the amygdala. The amygdala has way more communication pathways to the cortex than the cortex does to the amygdala. This means that the amygdala has a lot more power to send messages to our cortex than the cortex does to the amygdala. Not only that, but when we're in a highly anxious state, the access we have to our cortex is minimal, meaning that it's really hard for us to think logically or rationally. Just from a biological perspective, this is because it wouldn't necessarily be advantageous for us as a species to be able to talk ourselves out of actual danger. For instance, let's say we are trekking through a jungle and we came across a jaguar. Now, I don't know about you, but my amygdala would be pretty freaked at the sight of that. And so then it would send out all of those different warning signals that we've talked about, and it would prepare me to run away, hopefully, or fight, I guess, but that's a bad idea, or to shut down, whatever it deems necessary to make myself safe in that situation. In this case, if my cortex had the ability to talk back to my anxiety, to tell it, oh no, it's okay, this large jungle cat is not going to harm you, that's probably not the safest thought to have in that situation. Our bodies are super smart and are going to do everything in their power to protect us. So it's just not a risk that our body is going to be willing to take. So to sum it up, this is basically the biological system that makes it so we can't talk ourselves out of our anxiety. It's a protective mechanism, it's super effective, but if we don't know that it's a protective mechanism that makes it so we can't tell ourselves to stop being anxious, then it can quickly lead to lower self-confidence, even a bit of shame, or thinking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I make this happen when I know logically I have nothing to be anxious about? This is the type of information that I'm super passionate about getting out into the world so that you know that these are protective mechanisms hardwired in your body, and it's not something that is at all wrong with you. It's just a normal process, and when we normalize it, our anxiety can decrease, our shame can decrease, and we just generally start to feel better and more comfortable as our own person. So before we move on to that cognitive behavioral technique that I mentioned, if you have found any of this information thus far to be helpful, then please do take a second to hit that subscribe button down below. It really will help get this information and these videos out to other individuals just like yourself. Okay, so now to that cognitive behavioral therapy technique that I mentioned, where we get to use our thoughts to tell our brain that we're actually safe and not actually in danger. More often than not, our thoughts, or our anxious thoughts, are worst case scenario. These are also called catastrophic thoughts, like catastrophe and catastrophic thoughts. You get the idea. So if we can identify these thoughts as worst case scenario, then we can kind of see them on a spectrum. And if there's worst case scenario, then there's also best case scenario and likely scenario. So first and foremost, we're going to label this thought as worst case scenario when we acknowledge that it exists. And then we can walk through different curiosity or exploration types of questions called Socratic Questioning to help tell the amygdala that we're actually pretty safe and we don't need to be sending out those warning signals as if there's an actual threat. So here are just a few questions that you can go through when you notice that you're having one of these worst case scenario anxious thoughts. How do I know that this thought is even true? What is the evidence for it? And is there any evidence against it? Is this thought based on facts or is it based on feelings? Am I believing this thought to be true because I'm anxious or upset? Is this an all or nothing, black or white type of thought? Or is there this middle gray area that I haven't really considered? Am I jumping to conclusions or making unlikely assumptions? How would others interpret the same situation that might be leading to this thought? Is it possible that I'm only looking for evidence to support my thoughts rather than go against my thoughts? Have I ever had this type of thought before? And if yes, well then maybe I need to dig a little bit deeper and see if there's a core belief that's rooted in this thought. Did someone else pass along this thought to me? And if so, are they a reliable source? Now, when I'm using this technique with clients, these questions offer a great place to start. But the more that we work together, we can really specify these questions. We can make them unique for their particular situation. So as you're practicing this technique, feel free to make it your own. Create these questions that are gonna be unique and specific to you based on your thought patterns, your experience, and even any of those core beliefs that you've identified within yourself that aren't super helpful for you. Since we walked through a cognitive behavioral therapy technique today, I figured next week we're going to expand on CBT. I'm just going to call it CBT because it's going to get a tongue twister for me. So next week we're going to walk through just what CBT is, why it's so effective, and how it can be so helpful for things like anxiety and depression. I hope to see you there.